It's that time of day. Yes, absolutely. It is Talking Pints. I'm with Rear Admiral retired Mike Hewitt, US Navy. Welcome to Talking
Cheers.
Pints, Mike.
Thank
Marvellous stuff. Now, a naval aviator. We were earlier this week looking at some of the aviation exploits of the dam busters,
yes,
and wartime and Cold War work, because that station at Scampton, of course, is where the Vulcan bombers were and all the rest of it. Now, you were over 30 years in the US Navy.
I was fortunate enough to join in the early 80s during the Reagan-Thatcher buildup. One of these young kids that found itself flying an airplane 2 years after I joined the Navy, hunting Soviet submarines, which was a pure NATO mission, a pure operational mission. And really what Reagan and Thatcher said to the Russians, we will be on every submarine you have, 24/7, and we will kill it if we have to.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was one of the ways we won the Cold War. But worked very closely with the RAF, flew with the Nimrods, and it was just a fabulous mission for us.
So career, 30 years, 31 years in the Navy. You obviously loved it. Must be quite difficult. You come out after all those years, and yeah, you got a pension and all the rest of it, but to sort of decide what do you do with the rest of your life. And you know, you come and see me today, and you're still completely involved with
yes,
all the geopolitics that you were when you were in the
very
Navy,
much,
maybe more so. But energy, and you're CEO of IP3, which, as I understand it, you're looking at nuclear energy as being perhaps a way we can solve many of the world's problems. But before I come to that, kind of with the Cold War, we knew that the Soviet bloc was we felt that it was the potential threat. But boy, oh boy, hasn't the world changed. You know, 10 years ago, I didn't think China posed a territorial threat of any kind at all until this president came along. And I just wonder what you made of it, because America, the UK, NATO, we've been pretty solid in our support of Zelensky against what Putin's done. But what no one's looking at is on the other side of this equation. It appears that Xi, Putin, between them, are building quite a big alliance against us.
Oh, absolutely. I think if you look at Ukraine right now, it is a manifestation of bad leadership on behalf of the United States and the United Kingdom. As we like to say, democracy and freedom aren't intrinsically motivated on their own. You have to engage, you have to lead. And I believe that what's happening in Ukraine right now wasn't from the last 2 years. It was really a retraction of our countries from foreign policy and leadership, starting in Iraq, followed by Syria, where we let the Russians come in and really dominate that space. And then, of course, Crimea in 2014, and now Afghanistan. And when you look at these things, it really is, we stepped out of our leadership role, and so they filled the void. So
you think that the Chinese in particular and the Russians see us as being weak?
They absolutely see us as being weak. And if you follow just in the last year at the Beijing Olympics, Xi and Putin were together. They made a huge statement about the geopolitical order of the 21st century. And 2 weeks later, Putin invades Ukraine.
And Iran, now on joint naval exercises, I'm told, with
yes,
Russians and with Chinese. Now, the world is quite a frightening place. One of the effects of the Putin invasion was a rocketing price, particularly of natural gas, and Europe finding itself in a very, very big problem. You know, Trump told the Germans, if you remember a few years ago, don't become, and we in this country, of course, rely on import, although we've got more than enough oil and gas, but we do rely on those imports to keep us going. Yet at the same time, Mike, we've gone for wind energy, Boris Johnson in particular, as part of our net zero strategy. How big a role do you think energy policy is playing in world geopolitics right now? I
think in many ways, energy policy or energy sovereignty, as I've written about, is the Westphalian principle of the 21st century. In the 20th century, it was oil. Then now it's energy. And unfortunately, you go back 6 or 7 years, the price of energy and the energy poverty you have here in the UK today wasn't caused by Putin or the pandemic. It was caused by a total commitment to decarbonisation at the expense of energy security. And what we find ourselves in now throughout Europe is a skyrocketing price of energy because we don't have enough of it. And so the Chinese and the Russians have known this. They've known this from day one. And in many ways, they walked us down the primrose path of decarbonization, they don't attend the Paris Climate Accord. They don't attend COP26. They refuse to.
Yeah, they might just pop along, but
they're happy to see us overcommit to renewable energy, vilify fossil
and of course, they're
fuel.
burning coal, aren't they? In gargantuan amounts.
The Chinese open a new coal-fired plant every 10 days. The Chinese and the Russians think of energy strategically. We think of it through the narrow lens of decarbonization. So there you have the differences between their authoritarian governments and ours. And I think we're in a lot of trouble over that right now.
But on balance, I'd rather we weren't burning huge amounts of coal here in central London. I can see Battersea Power Station in the background there. And in 1952, the smog was horrific. So we obviously, all of us, want to have cleaner forms of energy. We want to have energy security, and I agree with you on that point entirely. But the cost factor that you mentioned, now you're an enthusiast, and you've got a business, promoting the idea that nuclear energy is the way forwards. But nuclear energy is very expensive, isn't it?
It's always expensive when you build a nuclear power plant. But you have to also balance the fact that it runs 95% of the time, day, night, all weather, for 60 years. So on balance, the capex is always higher, but the energy you get from it for the life of the energy and resilient power, which is not dependent upon the weather or fuel, is the big attribute that we need to focus on.
And this is base load power, isn't it?
It's abundant and base load power.
Yeah, because of course the obsession that this building behind me has with wind energy, and the problem that we have, of course, is intermittency with wind, with solar, and actually we've stuffed it with subsidy, so it's not really been particularly cheap either. Obviously there are concerns. There's 3 Mile Island, there's Chernobyl. There are obviously risks with nuclear energy. But here's the big story, and here's where I want your help. We keep reading in our newspapers about Rolls-Royce. Yes. And we know that Rolls-Royce make these tiny nuclear reactors that go in the back of our Trident submarines, and we're quite excited about the AUKUS deal, which you and us have done with Australia, and that could mean great business for Rolls-Royce, and so we're excited potentially about that. So we keep reading about small modular nuclear reactors. We're told they're a fraction of the size of the old monstrosities that we were building in the 60s. But my question is, have any actually been built yet around the world? Is this a pipe dream? Is it 15 years away? Is it achievable and doable in a reasonable time frame?
Well, I think your point about Rolls-Royce is a critical one. Rolls-Royce in the United States, in Westinghouse and General Electric, were really the founders of nuclear power, both for the military and for our civilian use. Collectively, they built over 200 nuclear power plants, so they have a rich history in nuclear power. But these were the large gigawatt-sized plants. The future of nuclear power, rightfully so, is in a small modular reactor. So think of it as factory-built. Think of it like building an aircraft. You reduce the risk and the cost by building it time and time again in the same way. So what you have with Rolls-Royce, which is an aerospace company that builds the nuclear power plant for your Navy today, the technology leap is very simple. It's a basic light water reactor that they've been building for 80 years. The difference is they're going to build it in a factory. They're going to drive down the price point. And the beauty of an SMR is I can put it where I need the power.
Are these operational yet anywhere in the world?
Well, in many ways, they're still in development. But I don't believe that that's the challenge. The challenge is to get on with committing to a demand signal. So what you have with Rolls-Royce is a fully funded development activity to get their SMR ready for fleet operation. What you don't have is a demand signal to actually buy it. So it's...
What, because government's not committed?
Because the government is dilly-dallying around with a 24 gigawatt commitment to nuclear power without committing to the only industry you have, which is Rolls-Royce. And the rest of the world wants to buy Rolls-Royce SMRs, but they want to see this country build it first, which is a simple industrial model. And I believe Rolls-Royce will be the dominant small modular reactor company around the planet. And from a UK perspective, it's the only industry you have.
Which is a very exciting opportunity. Do we have any realistic view of what the time frame is? Flash to bang. We say, right, okay, we're going to go for this. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years?
So Rolls-Royce has announced that by 2030, which is not that far away in nuclear world, you could have power on the grid today. We believe with our approach, by bringing in private capital and innovation and commercialization, we can pull that left by a couple years. But the point is, it's factory build. So I don't build one at a time. I get a factory going, and I'm building 2 or 4 or 6 a year. That's how you drive down the cost curve. That's how you attract investment. And the most important thing is the industries of the future.
Final thought on energy. If we have these SMRs, do we need wind energy?
There's a place for renewable energy. But I will tell you this. It's more of a niche industry and a niche form of energy. Nuclear power is your baseload. Nuclear power in the form of an SMR can actually complement wind energy. So when the wind's not blowing, you can bring in the nuclear power.
Yeah, but when the wind's not, when the wind is blowing, it's still producing energy anyway, isn't it? I wonder whether we need wind energy.
Well, I will tell you this. If you really want to focus on the energy of the future, it's fossil fuel with clean carbon, which we have many ways to clean up the carbon, and it's nuclear power.
Well, I have to say, Mike, I'm sure it's not quite as exciting as being a naval aviator, but I think it's equally important. And thanks for coming on and sharing your thoughts
Thank you, Nigel.
with me on Talking Pints.